Hello?
There.
Okay, it's Jay.
I see one of you coming across as council member ... You might want to change it to your name so I know who you are. I see Jay Rosapepe is with his name, but I can't tell who this other person is, and you're muted right now.
How do I do my picture?
Oh boy, that's not the Zoom 101 class.
Oh, there we are.
There you go.
Okay, got it. Not that that's an improvement.
I got somebody else. There's Fred. There's Scott Diener. So it was Scott. There we go. Perfect. And I'm just going to ask you guys to mute yourself, and I'll try to catch you so we don't minimize the background noise if we can. So
this is just a check. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
You're great. You got Brandy there with the flag. We staged that. Got Jill Bolts, aka John Clausen there. So we have Jay. I've got.
Oh God, what did I do?
Fred.
John, what did I do?
Scott. I got 5. I'm looking for Cindy and Beck.
I can't see Scott or me.
Correct. Because you have not enabled your video.
Oh.
It's in the, so click on, hover over your box and then
start video.
Yep, start video. There you go.
Okay.
And Brandy is going to start recording in a minute, but I'm waiting on Beck and who did I say? Cindy. Looks like I've lost Scott though. Where'd Scott go?
I see Scott.
Oh, yeah, there we go. There was another tab. Beck or Cindy, you out there? Okay, we'll get another minute or so, but and then we'll get started because we were supposed to start at 6:30. There's Beck. I'm going to try gallery view for this one so I can see all you guys at once. It'll probably make my head spin. So if you just kind of maybe wave your hand if you want to be recognized, because I've got it, all of you on a screen now. We'll try that out. So guess we'll get started here. We've got 6 of the 7 of you here. So Brandy, you ready to start the recording? You ready?
Yes. Yep.
All right. So good evening, and I'd like to welcome you and call to order the April 14th Portership City Council meeting. It's in this new format with using Zoom technology. So with that, I would ask you to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, and Brandy has even got the flag. So I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I was late with my hand on my heart. Charlie got me there.
So, Mayor, I'm not able to record. I think you have to give me permission. So I don't know if you want to record it and then I can.
Oh my goodness. We're going to have to back up here.
It says we're recording, Rob.
Does it? It says it's recording. Hey, Brandy, as a backup, do you want to get the little pocket recorder?
I have that going right now.
Perfect. So there we got it. We got redundancy.
That'll work.
It's
All
been,
right.
it's
So
been recording since it started.
it says it's recording. Yeah, you're right. So we're all learning here. Do we have any proposed amendments to this evening's agenda? Okay, I'm seeing heads shake. Somebody want to unmute and make a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve the agenda as distributed.
Second.
Got a second by Councilmember Cacciardi, a motion by Councilmember Clausen. All right, you'll be voting on to approve. I think you're all going to have to unmute right now, at least all the council members. You'll be voting to approve the agenda as presented. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the agenda has been approved. So we are on to,
Mayor, I have a question.
certainly.
Are you able to share the documents?
I could, I think. Would you like me to do that? Ooh, just a second. I almost hit a bad button.
Beck, are you on your new device?
Yes.
So if you open up that web browser, like the agenda and everything, and then minimize the screen, you can drag it way to the right and it'll snap to half of your screen. And then this other Zoom deal, you can snap to the other half. And so you can see
Okay.
both at the same time.
What was that again?
So if you open up your agenda right now, that pile of documents. So you're
Okay,
seeing that?
I had saved those and I couldn't get them to minimize. But if I open up the actual documents,
Yeah, so as if all you're seeing right now is you're reading your documents.
Okay.
And then if you just minimize it, so it won't go away, you're just making it smaller. You're going from full screen mode just to it's kind of minimized.
And then the speaker will be in, the person is speaking.
Well, not
If I-
yet, it won't be. It won't be
Yeah.
yet. But just kind of minimize it. And then if you kind of go to the very top bar above click and hold it and drag it way to like the right side of your screen, it'll snap to where it'll only cover 50% of your screen. And then you can go through that same process with the Zoom view with everyone that you're looking at on the Zoom call and minimize it and drag it way to the left. Then it'll snap to the other half. And so your screen will be split. Half of you looking at the Zoom call and half of you looking at your agenda.
Or you could get another monitor for the next meeting and.
There you go.
you're a genius. Thank you.
Yep.
And I would do that, Beck, but it warned me when I tried to minimize to go grab that because I'm recording, I don't have that capability. So
Yeah.
Okay.
sorry.
I'm
then-
fine.
Yeah. And then Beck,
I'm grateful Sean had the technology.
and then for
Thank you.
scrolling through your agenda, just use your touch screen. It's a lot easier. Just put your thumb on your agenda and scroll through it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Just don't give us the finger with your camera.
Okay.
That's all we ask. All right, so we got the agenda approved. We are to our consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
I would move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I'll second it.
Okay, I have a motion by Councilmember Ashby, a second by Councilmember Clausen to approve the consent agenda as presented. Further discussion on any of the items on the consent agenda? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the consent agenda as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the consent agenda has been approved. Backing up here, I'm misstepping here. We are taking citizen comment in written form to the clerk's office, so we aren't going to take live citizen comment this evening. So I missed that earlier. So we have no presentations or public hearings. We're on to our first business item, which is adoption of an ordinance amending Port Orchard Municipal Code, section 2.04.045, remote attendance. And this is the changes that you had asked for previously, and I believe you have a red line version of this in your packet.
Mayor, would you like me to speak to it?
You may speak to that,
Okay.
Kelly, if you'd like.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. As the mayor flagged for council members, this is the follow-up to the ordinance amending the Port Orchard Municipal Code section pertaining to remote attendance. Modifications have been made to address the concerns that were raised by multiple council members. One, to make sure that the language was plural so that more than one could appear, more than one council member and more than one employee could appear when an emergency related to public health or safety has been declared and remote attendance is necessary to conduct business. And the second edit was to ensure that all council members are offered equal opportunity for remote attendance, such that the mayor couldn't pick and choose which council members to authorize for remote attendance. And as the mayor mentioned, the ordinance in your packet is redlined to show those changes.
Thank you. With that, I'd move to adopt an ordinance amending Port Orchard Municipal Code Section 2.04.045 pertaining to remote attendance as presented.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilmember Cacciardi and a second by Councilmember Rosapepe. Further discussion or questions of Ms. Archer?
This is Scott. I just had one minor correction. The last whereas recital, the second line, the spread of the novel coronavirus known and COVID-19 should be known as.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a Scrivener's error. We'll correct that. Thank you for flagging that.
Okay, any other corrections, questions, comments? Hearing none, you'll be voting on the adoption of code related to remote attendance. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. We are to item B, adoption of a resolution approving a contract with the Washington State Department of Commerce for McCormick Woods Sanitary Sewer Lift Station number 2 rebuild project. Mr. Dorsey.
Thank you, Your Honor, council members. The city of Port Orchard has been awarded a direct appropriations grant from the 2019-2020 capital budget managed by the State Department of Commerce for the McCormick Woods Sanitary Sewer Lift Station number 2 rebuild project. The application for this grant, the city's receipt of this grant via legislative allocation and the project associated with the grant have been discussed at prior meetings in 2019 and 2020, including a presentation on this project at the council's retreat in January of 2020. The general terms of the grants are as follows. The grant is an $800,000 grant. Our share is $784,000. Our start date, we can claw back to July 1st, 2019, and our end date is June 30th, 2023. The grant funding will be added to the city's current sewer capital 23 within the adopted 2019-2020 biennial budget. Now, the McCormick Woods Sanitary Sewer Station 2 rebuild project ad-ready design was awarded to Stellar J, as you remember, back in December of 2019. That's contract C06719, and work has already commenced. The city finds that discussion on this item, possible action, complies with Governor Inslee's Proclamation 2028. Discussion and possible action are necessary for multiple reasons. The project is essential to the city's sanitary sewer system, which is the key component, or is a key component of the city's essential services for public health and safety. In this project, and the acceptance of the grant funding is time sensitive because the work has commenced for the city. Discussions and possible actions on this item are routine for many reasons. Taking action to accept a grant from Commerce is a common occurrence. Grant funding is allocated to Port Orchard like many cities in Washington, and this project has been on the city's agenda for over a year. Acceptance of this grant has been discussed at many publicly noticed city council meetings, and the public has been previously able to have been able and invited to comment on this grant. Staff recommends that the city council approve a contract with the State Department of Commerce, thereby accepting a direct appropriations grant for the McCormick Woods Sanitary Sewer Lift Station number 2 rebuild project in the amount of $800,000.
Councilmember Clausen.
Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt a resolution authorizing the mayor to execute a contract with the State Department of Commerce accepting a direct appropriation grant for the McCormick Woods Sanitary Sewer Lift Station number 2 rebuild project in an amount of $800,000.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion by Councilmember Clausen, a second by Councilmember Diener. If you recall, this was a year ago's legislative ask that we got this money from the legislature, and Commerce is managing these funds. If you've driven by the entrance to McCormick Woods, that's a big hole in the ground there that's well under construction. So it's timely we get this grant document executed so that we can get reimbursement for the expenses we're incurring. So, other questions of myself or Mr. Dorsey? Okay, we'll be voting on an adoption of a resolution approving a contract with the Washington State Department of Commerce for the McCormick Woods Sanitary Sewer Lift Station number 2 rebuild. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion has been, or the resolution has been approved. To item C, adoption of a resolution authorizing the use of digital and electronic signature technology and ratifying the use of electronic signatures during declared emergency. So, Ms. Archery, would you like to read a staff report on that?
Certainly, this resolution would do two things. First, the City Council would be authorizing the use and receipt of an electronic signature in lieu of a written signature, and establishing the policies related to that authorization. And second, the City Council would be ratifying the use of the electronic signature sent or received that has occurred during the public health crisis to date. By way of background, the Washington Legislature has authorized government agencies to use, accept, and ensure that all of the public have access to submit electronic signatures for public agencies. The legislation that was adopted originally in 2015 authorized electronic dealings generally. During the most recent session, however, the legislature enacted another bill, engrossed Substitute Senate Bill 6028, which is adopting provisions of the Uniform Electronic Transaction Act. This essentially removes all barriers to the use of electronic signatures. As of June 11th, 2020, so coming up soon, all agencies will still need to develop their own policies for the use and acceptance of electronic signatures, but that act removes your discretion essentially, so that now all agencies are going to be required to utilize electronic signatures in some format. You still have discretion again to adopt policies related to how that form of signature can be used and received. So this resolution again would authorize the receipt and use of electronic signatures by staff and by the mayor in accordance with the policies that are affixed as Exhibit A to the resolution itself. Then separately, you would be ratifying the use of electronic signatures that have occurred during the pendency of this public health emergency. You know, oftentimes the use of electronic signatures have multiple benefits to public agencies, including decreasing your reliance on paper transactions, which is something that this city is already shifting towards, lessening administrative demands, improving efficiency, and saving time and reducing costs. And at no time is this more prevalent when we're in a public health emergency, when FaceTime is essentially impossible, and electronic signatures are of great value. So the policy, again, the draft policy is attached to the resolution as Exhibit A, and I'm happy to answer any questions related to the policy. It was developed with staff's assistance this last week, and will be utilized moving forward with council's authorization.
Okay, I'm multitasking here and trying to get something else to open up. But just to foreshadow here a bit too, this policy is going to allow us to deal with today. And remember, you've authorized this Laserfish project, which is going to digitalize our processes and our records. And we don't have to solve it today, but I plan to bring back a larger discussion. You know, we still have all of you guys who are sponsoring an ordinance or a resolution, signing paper, and brought to question whether or not we need to do that. You don't have to in the future. We're not ready yet to tackle that, but I think we will be ready to tackle that in the future. So we plan to bring that discussion back. I'm just planting a seed for you to think about that. You guys take action here at council meetings to approve the legislation, and we're not, we can bring you along with the Laserfish technology and train you in the electronic signatures, but I'm questioning whether or not that's really necessary. And once again, we don't have to solve that tonight. So this is just dealing with today's, emergent issue. So, Mr. Clausen, I see you're highlighted there. Or do you have somebody have a question?
If not, I would move to adopt a resolution authorizing the use of the digital and electronic signature technology, establishing an associated policy, and ratifying the use of the electronic signatures during the declared emergency.
Second.
So a motion by Councilmember Clausen, a second by Councilmember Cacciardi. Do you have any questions of Charlie? Do you have, or Noah? Noah's really leading this charge on the technology side with Laserfish. So happy to answer any questions. Councilmember Diener?
I've got a question on page 59. And so on 59 under C, it looks like 3 criteria are considered. Do all of those criteria need to be met, or one of those criteria, or the balance? I wasn't quite sure what the intent was.
The intent is for C to be coupled with B. So B states that the mayor, in conjunction with designees, will develop a list of formatted electronic signatures that are acceptable. So anything from a digitized image of a signature all the way to using DocuSign. And the criteria in C are used to determine what level of signature or electronic protection are warranted based on the type of document. So what the mayor will be developing is a matrix. So a deed, for example, will require a higher level. It will likely require DocuSign, as opposed to something that has no legal impact would have a digitized image. So those questions are utilized to determine within the matrix which type of digital signature. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. I think do we have a motion on the floor, Brandy? Yes.
We do.
Councilmember Clausen and then Councilmember Cacciardi seconded. Further questions on this matter? Okay, hearing none, you'll be voting on the adoption of a resolution authorizing the use of digital and electronic signature technology and ratifying the use of electronic signatures during the declared emergency. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed? Hearing none, the resolution is approved. We are to item D, which is adoption of a resolution approving a contract with Northwest Cascade, Inc. for a grinder pump installation project at 4330 Bethel Avenue and documenting procurement procedures. Mr. Dorsey.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, council members. So on February 4th, 2020, and pursuant to the hearing examiner's condition of this.
Hey, Mark, can you speak up a little bit? We're having a little bit of trouble hearing you. Or speak more towards your computer.
So on February 4th, 2020, is that better?
A little better.
Because I'm like really projecting in my office here. So,
okay.
On February 4th, 2020, pursuant to the hearing examiner's conditions of the Indazio preliminary plat decision, which is that plat off of Blueberry, and we had to rebuild Blueberry. The city's public works department staff issued a request for proposals to 3 qualified contractors from the current MRSC small works roster, which is attached, for the installation of a sewage grinder pump to replace the existing on-site septic system impacted by the construction of Blueberry. By the February 28, 2020 deadline, only 1 proposal was received. On March 18, 2020, staff confirmed the requirements of the bidder's checklist and determined that Northwest Cascade, Inc. was the lowest responsible bidder for the project with a bid of $16,132 applicable tax included. Staff recommends adoption of a resolution 009-20, thereby approving contract C 039-20 with Northwest Cascade Inc. for the grinder pump installation at 4330 Bethel Avenue in the amount of $16,132 with all taxes included. In addition, the condition also stipulates that the county or their successor pays the appropriate sewer connection fees, and we're the successor. That's it.
Would there be a motion? Councilmember Rosapepe.
Mayor, I move to adopt resolution number 009-20, thereby approving contract number C039-20 with Northwest Cascade Inc. for the grinder pump installation at 330 Bethel Avenue in the amount of $16,132, applicable taxes included, and documenting the professional services procurement procedures. In addition, this motion allows for the city of Port Orchard to pay the appropriate sewer connection fees as required.
Second.
A motion by Councilmember Rosapepe, a second by Councilmember Diener. Do you have any questions for Mr. Dorsey on this matter?
Mark, is this a typical residential grinder pump like is used up in the McCormick Woods communities?
Yes, it is.
So does that seem a little bit exorbitant? I know a resident that recently replaced one that had failed and it was like $3,000. Do you think that because this is the only bid, this is high, or is this kind of anticipated?
Well, one, it was the only bid. Two is it's a brand new system. It's not like what we're doing at McCormick step conversions, we're converting something. They had just an existing gravity drain field system that the road got into the reserve area. So we're having just to bring in a new system. So this also includes coming off of Blueberry, getting to the new Blueberry stub out. So there's some additional costs there. So it's a combination of both. I think it's high, but it's also, we got stuck with this because of the annexation.
Okay.
Councilmember Diener, you have a question?
Yeah, in the staff report, there's mention of a predetermined adverse impact to abutting property at 4330. What was the predetermined adverse impact?
The reconstruction of Blueberry Road would get into their drain field reserve area.
Okay, all right.
Remember, this project started in the county and the engineer had designed the offsite improvements for Indazio and Blueberry Ridge. And it was at that time that they identified during the survey that the reserve drain field area of the 4330 pasture, which is where their drain field is located, was going to be impacted. So at that point, the county was on the hook to make this connection. When we annexed the Bethel corridor, that became our responsibility.
Other questions for Mr. Dorsey? Okay, I have a motion by Councilmember Rosapepe and I believe a second by Councilmember Diener. All in favor of approving the resolution awarding the contract to Northwest Cascade Inc. for the grinder pump installation at 4330 Bethel Avenue, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Hearing none, the contract has been approved. We are to item E, and this is adoption of a resolution approving a continuity of operations, continuity of government plan. And Chief Brown, look at that in uniform. All right, so this is yours.
Yeah, so I know there were a couple of questions, so we can either address those right now or I can read through the summary if the council would.
You start with your staff report and then we'll go to questions from there.
Sounds good. So as part of the city's emergency management planning, the department directors and the mayor have developed the continuity of operations, continuity of government, a COOP or a COG plan. This plan is a roadmap to ensure primary and mission essential functions continue to be performed during a wide range of emergencies to include localized acts of nature, accidents, epidemics, in technological or attack-related emergencies. Any event that makes it impossible for employees to work in their regular facility could result in an activation of the continuity plan. The plan was developed in accordance with the Federal Emergency Management Agency guidelines or guidance for the federal, non-federal entities.
Okay.
Our recommendation is that council approve the proposed COOP-COG plan.
Okay, Councilmember Ashby, I think you had a handful of questions. Do you want to start with yours?
I do have a handful of questions. And I did, so everyone knows, I did have a conversation with the chief and the mayor today. Our process or the procedure that our city council has typically used is items come before one of our committees, then they go to work study, and then they go to council. So council is very well informed of the policy that we are approving, and we understand it. This one, I was unaware of until I read it in on our agenda. So my primary question, or one of my concerns, is I want to make sure, I want to confirm that this particular policy was vetted and approved for recommendation by all the department heads, and that the mayor considers the policy critical to move forward with our operations without going through this process. I want to make sure that it was fully vetted by all of our department heads, and the mayor feels it's critical for us to approve this absent the normal process for it coming, through council. So anyway, that's one of my concerns. My
Want me to
other,
address that one first?
sure.
Okay,
And
so
I can chime in on that one too.
so we all the department directors did read this and provide input, as well as myself, and we made some edits to it. And can we operate without this? We have a plan. The plan we have is names individual people. It's not ideal. Historically, our prior chief wasn't big on emergency operations, and Mark Dorsey was willing to do it, and so he was the incident or operations manager in the plan. So it's a bit of a rework. I'm very appreciative of our current chief's passion for this issue. Do we have to do this tonight if you guys aren't comfortable with it? Absolutely not. You guys are the city council, and if we want to back up and take this, I mean, we can operate in a draft format. We could approve this tonight and revisit it again. It's really your guys' call. And the earth isn't going to stop revolving tomorrow. But it would, because we don't have a better plan in place. But what we have is pretty outdated. And I apologize, these aren't normal times. And so we're trying to just kind of do the best we can to, continue to get things done. And the chief thought this was pretty important. So I supported that, supported him in that. And, but ultimately it's your guys' decision. So
I guess
Beck, you have, I think, Mark, go ahead.
add to that, Beck. So as Rob mentioned, the previous two police chiefs were very uninterested in emergency management. And so I was kind of muddling through it. We have the privilege of having an extremely gifted and enthusiastic emergency managing member now with the chief. And there are a number of documents that I see that we're going to be improving, but this is one that should have been done a long time ago. I'd been focusing the last year on the new emergency operations plan, working with DEM. So this is really, in the COVID, just really kind of brought this to the forefront of needing to be done. I mean, this is really a document that just says, if we have a catastrophic event, how do we maintain continuity as a state government? And it's just long overdue.
Okay, when I read the document, the pandemic situation, the emergency situation we're in right now, this document would cover that. So, but my other concern is in the actual resolution. And I'm not sure what page this is in our agenda.
Page 90.
90, but that says that the city council hereby adopts this COOP, and the mayor is authorized and directed to take administrative steps necessary to ensure successful implementation of the plan. Then it goes on to say the mayor may make updates to the plan without further council approval when necessary due to changes in staffing and administrative needs as determined in the mayor's discretion. And I personally am uncomfortable. I'm not uncomfortable necessarily with this statement, because I believe when you have an emergency situation, there may be events that come up that the mayor has to make decisions on that may be a little different than is in our plan. But I do believe there should be some requirements that those changes be informed to the city council in a timely manner. I think that.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you there. And that is how our personnel, our ordinances related to personnel policies are written. And I think it would be appropriate to have language in there that states that if we make changes to this, just like we do with personnel policy, that I have an obligation to report that back to you at the next council meeting, or of something of that nature. So I think that's a good point.
Yeah, my primary concerns were this is a major policy for us, and it was just brought to us in the agenda with no prior involvement of the city council. And so I want to be clear that all of our department heads have vetted it and that they're in agreement that it needs some vetting before I say yes. And so who's going to do that vetting? And it would have to be the department heads, and we would need to rely on their expertise to say, yes, this is the plan we need.
Yeah. And Nick, I saw you raise your hand. Did you have a statement?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that Annex 4 was provided to me to review my department, and I took a pretty light hand approach to the existing language. And so Councilmember Ashby called me this afternoon and asked about my order of succession for emergencies. And I'm now realizing as I read the introduction, the entire chapter was written about emergency building inspections. And so my order of succession has only to do with building inspections, not the operation of my whole department. And I think that's probably a legacy of how we were organized previously. And so now that I've better understand this, I think that additional edits probably are required in my chapter to talk about the DCD more holistically, rather than just updating the positions and taking the approach that I did to reviewing this document. I also noticed a couple of other issues in the table of contents referring to our department by a previous title and some other minor changes, but I don't have a problem moving forward with this right now if we have to, but I would like to take another crack at it and probably, I reviewed my department, but I'd like to look at everybody else's as well.
Okay. Other comments? Noah, do you have any? Go ahead, Noah.
Yeah, I guess if the umbrella of this approval is that I fully vetted this in all of their departments, I'm going to confess I did not. Again, I focused on my department, so I don't really know what Nick's section says or Mark's section. So if that's the context in which you would want our support, I would prefer a little more time to actually go back and do that diligence and talk with Nick and Mark and the chief and just make sure that we are confident if that's the expectation. So I'm kind of support what Nick said. When we got this, again, we've been very fluid the last couple of weeks, trying to respond to the COVID crisis. The chief's been doing a good job managing on that front. We've been trying to get folks to telework. So I can't say I took a a hard look at the document. I filled out my section in HR and IT, and I thought I did a pretty good job. But now that Nick's pointing out something in his section makes me want to go take another look at it again. So that's where I guess I'd leave it.
Okay, well, I did both. The chief had me review the entire document first, then I looked at my particular section.
So it sounds like a couple of folks want to look at this again. Councilmember Rosa Pippy, you raised your hand.
I did. I would echo what Councilmember Ashby had, and I don't know if it requires a motion that it be pulled till it's completely vetted. Okay, then that I think we should at this time bring it back to another council meeting.
Okay, so I don't have a motion on the table at this point. See the chief, and then
I add one thing. So this is a living document. Certainly the council can make whatever decision it wishes on this. My recommendation is as it is formed right now, there is some solidity. There is an ability for us to move forward with a little bit more direction than kind of we're hoping we know what we want to do in the event that things get a little bit more serious. So my request would be is that at least we recognize that this is a living document. If the council is willing to approve it as is, and we can move forward, maybe even adjust the resolution so that we keep people a little bit better informed. The rest of the department heads can continue to form this, but at least we have a roadmap and a base for moving forward in the crisis. And that would be my ask. But again, if the council would like to hold off, I'm fine with that as well.
Councilmember Diener.
Well, first of all, in answer to Matt's request, I don't necessarily have a problem with that. I think the resolution that we would approve authorizes the mayor to direct that. I had some questions about the document itself. And I don't know if we're ready for that. Are we ready for questions?
You might as well, because if we're going to make edits, we'd like to do them once versus bring this back and we edit it again. So
yes,
fire away.
Well, on page 101, there is a list of critical staff, and one of them is a communications manager or public information officer. Yes. And I'm just curious, is that the city clerk's role to be the PIO?
Myself and the clerk, and we're going to have hopefully in about 10 minutes, we're going to have a contractor that would help us with that.
That was that's where I was headed with that. Okay.
But that person doesn't work without direction from me, and I'm going to assign tasks. So.
Okay. Yeah, because I think, good, strong oversight would be needed in this kind of an event.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And then on page 113, if I can get there.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm having some problems with my tech, but go ahead.
Under 6.0, key personnel, it begins with all city personnel considered essential. And that kind of grabbed me because of how the governor's executive order has defined essential. And I wasn't sure that was necessarily the intent. I think maybe the wording for that needs to be looked at, unless we're taking a position here that everybody that works for the city are considered essential as the state recognizes that.
So I think as it stands right now that we would consider all city employees essential. But I would put a caveat to that, is that we need to, when we are not in the middle of a crisis, or sit down and look at the federal guidelines and really determine each position as to whether or not it's considered essential or non-essential.
And that's somewhat the exercise we went through here at City Hall is we have everybody working right now, but some aren't essential to be in the office. We've got them working remotely, but we've got everybody working on something.
And I guess,
yes, and the other issue too is that when we initially looked at who was essential and what tasks were essential, the evaluation had been based on a snowstorm or a windstorm or something that was very short term, 2 or 3 days. And I think that we need to, as an organization, sit down and really look at in the long term, if we're talking a week, 2 week, a month, 2 months, what essential tasks need to be carried out over that period, and how do we start delineating? You're not essential for one day, but if it's a week, you're essential. And those are things that staff is really going to have to sit down once we get past the crisis and really determine these things. But at this point, I would say arguably that all city staff are essential just to keep functionality.
And I'd like to
Go ahead,
I'd
Mark.
like to add to that. So in all my emergency management training, it's been very explicit that every city employee is required to report, whether that's to their own EOC. And I'm not talking about a minor flooding event or whatever. You know, we're building this is a you know, Cascadia or a radiation leak from the shipyard. This is a major event. And under those events, every city employee is required to report to an EOC, whether I end up down in Shelton or Chris Hammer ends up on Bainbridge Island. We are all required as city and county employees of the state, to report to an EOC at some time. Once we get our family matters squared away, once we find a way to get in. And that's what this document is built for. This isn't built for a windstorm. This is really built for something much larger.
Correct. Thank you, Mark.
Okay.
So what's so other questions before I ask?
Yes, I had one more, and this goes to the table of COOP personnel. There's a lot of TBDs, including in the planning section, legislative section. Is each row slated for somebody in the city to occupy? So for example, the logistics has 2, 4, 6 different rows of TBDs. Are we looking for 6 personnel to fill the logistics sections and IT?
Not necessarily. So where we are at right now is, again, we're trying to make sure that we have a good baseline. Again, this is a living document. So the hope was that we were going to be able to come to council with what we had right now and then continue to build out. But the concern was, especially leading up to what we are hoping is the peak of what we're dealing with right now, is that we have a framework that we can base a response off of. We may only have 1 or 2 people that can back logistics and IT. I mean, again, as a smaller city, we are not going to have the resources that other larger areas are going to have. But moving forward, we want to make sure, at least as we're building out, we have something to build upon.
Okay, that tracks with what I was thinking, is that this is a table of what could be, but we wouldn't necessarily have somebody assigned to each one of these. I think there's 8 with logistics.
Yeah, you need to realize that this is based on the system that expands and contracts as needed. So we could have an event and we could have somebody from the clerk's office being the only one that gets up to the EOC initially, and they are the incident commander initially. And as people make their way from Bainbridge or Belfair or wherever, more people come in. I may end up in finance until Noah's shows up, and then I can go to operations. But the whole system expands and contracts as needed. So as the chief was saying, it's extremely fluid, and it's just needs to be adaptable.
And I know Noah is extremely concerned with Mark managing finance.
Here now.
I'm hoping that Noah will end up in ops.
Charlie, raise your hand.
Oh, thank you. Just two things to add on. The first, to answer one of the questions raised by Councilmember Ashby. This chart of personnel gets to the language in the resolution and what the chief and I had discussed when we put together that resolution. The mayor needs the discretion to change the names that fit in and change the positions as staffing changes. It wasn't intended to be a general authorization to the mayor to make modifications to the plan, but rather to, whenever there's changes to personnel, that those names can be substituted in, those positions can be substituted in, so that we're not having to go back to council each time when personnel changes. The second, as far as timing is concerned, I do want to flag that having an adopted continuity of operations plan is a precursor to certain FEMA funding opportunities. So the longer we go without one, the more that is at risk. I can't speak to any specific grants or specific funding sources, but that is something that's well represented on FEMA's correspondence about these plans.
And we do have a plan. It just states that Mark Dorsey's in charge, and it names individual people versus departments and so on. And so, finance director, DCD director, and so on and so forth. So we've got, what we have is very, very outdated.
I have another question. Listening to Mark speak, he's indicating that the emergency would be something really catastrophic. And when I read this, it seems to me that the current pandemic situation would trigger this. When is this actually triggered?
So this is triggered again upon, ideally it would be triggered if the mayor requests it or whomever is in charge. But it really has to do with when you start losing leadership. One of the long conversations that the mayor and I had was, and actually, ma'am, you and I had today, was if you've got the mayor and the mayor is out and the mayor pro tem is out, what happens after that? So it really comes down to whether or not the critical incident starts affecting leadership positions. It doesn't have to be an earthquake. It doesn't have to be a pandemic. It's all these department head positions and leadership positions. If you start losing these, that's when you can start activating a COOP or a COG. Does that answer your question?
And currently, Beck, we are having, we don't have a group of people in a room. We're down to a couple times a week right now. The Department of Emergency Management has the countywide center active right now. Our city we're doing it virtually. It's been Mark and the chief primarily, and Tony Lang, and I've been popping in on them. It's a 20-minute Zoom meeting in the afternoon just to go over what's happening in the city. And primarily it's been about getting PPEs and things of that nature, and staffing. It hasn't, when we had the tornado, that was a different animal. Every situation, I guess, is different.
Yeah, and to second it, ma'am, the bigger issue is going to be how a crisis is managed. This is not necessarily how the government would be managed. This is that piece that takes us from a critical incident back to normalcy. And it may not, we could have a tornado and this would not be activated. But in a pandemic, if the mayor and the mayor pro tem and the chief of police are out and unable to respond, well, who's in charge? Until the council can come in and determine who is going to be the head. And this establishes that pattern so that there's no question, there's no infighting. We have a path forward until the council is able to determine how they are going to manage the government. Yeah, Noah, yes, sir.
So what page do I find that answer, Chief? If the mayor's out, mayor pro tem's out, and the chief's out, what page do I look to tell me who's in charge?
So unfortunately,
chart.
my tech has gone down. I had it, hold on, it may have come back up.
Does that default to the city clerk? Is that how I'm supposed to read that table of 4?
I believe so. And again, this is all just temporary. So thank you, Brandy, for stepping up. We appreciate it. But again, and those things are certainly, that's where the department heads and the mayor all need to decide. And again, it's no different than the federal government, where you start looking at lines of succession. And it's not to determine who's going to be the next mayor. It's determining who's going to hold the line until the council makes that decision.
Yeah, no, I'm looking at page 117.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at now. I'm seeing where I'm at in the chart.
Okay.
Yeah, I just
131.
my tech is down. I apologize. But that's the point of this. And again, when we have all discussed as department heads, the goal is to yes, sir.
All right, so just so I'm clear, so if the city clerk goes down, then the deputy city clerk steps in, and not another director.
Well, no, and that's where it's different. So when you go to there's each appendix, right? There's city council, there's mayor, and on down. So this is where we need to make sure that when we talk about the mayor and who succeeds the mayor as we move down, it may not necessarily be the deputy city clerk. deputy city clerk replaces the city clerk if the city clerk is out. But the mayor needs to make the determination of how that cascades down, because it may go mayor, mayor pro tem, finance director, city clerk, public works, police chief. I mean, however the government decides that is appropriate, but it's not based upon individuals. It's based upon responsibilities.
Can I just interject real quick in that I really appreciate the discussion we're having, because this document is obviously a little more complex than at first glance. And I believe that's why I had hoped that it would have come before a work study, so we were all very, very clear in what our succession plan was. That's where my concerns came in, and that's why I went to the idea that I could support it if all of our department heads, had agreed that we should had vetted it and moved it forward. That's kind of the baseline of where I was going, because I looked at just some of the succession plans and questioned them. And I didn't feel that I should get into the weeds that far in a document like this.
So I think at a minimum, we're bringing this back to the May work study. And I'm very optimistic that we're going to have a work study in May, even if it's in this format. I'm planning on canceling next week's work study because it would be this format, but I think a work study is much more productive when we're all around a big table and talking through this. This is a pretty complex document. Really, I think the question, I think that's a given that we're taking this back to the work study, whether we're taking no action tonight and coming to the work study and talking about this plan, or we're adopting what we have so we have a better plan than we have today. And then again, looking at it over the next 3 weeks internally and bringing it back. Either way, I think we're working on it some more as directors, all looking at this document holistically and talking about it at the work study. So I'm just trying to move this versus getting into the weeds, move this all along here a little bit. So Councilmember Diener?
I'm okay with the resolution that's been presented, with the understanding that we've got to have more discussion about this.
Okay. So Councilmember Rosapepe?
Mayor, I think with two department heads saying that they would like to visit it, it sounds like there's more work that needs to be done. I'd like to see it pulled to the work study.
Okay, so I got one that's okay with it. Councilmember Clausen?
Yeah, I guess I agree with Jay. There seems to be an awful lot of misunderstandings or just lack of knowledge of it, including on mine. I read it today, but some of the questions that's been raised, I guess I do wonder if it's something that absolutely has to be done tonight. If it has this many questions, it's also one of those issues that we're really there's not much public involvement in this thing, and I don't know if they've had an opportunity to see it in advance either. So I guess I'm leaning towards Jay. If we have a plan now, probably not the best, but it can hold us over for a couple more weeks.
Okay, it would actually be about 5 weeks. Yeah.
Who's counting amongst friends?
Yeah. Beck, I think I know where you stand on this. I think you're where Jay and John are. Sean or Fred, do you have just trying to
I would just say that I think this is a massive step in the right direction, right? I totally agree with the sentiment from Mark and Chief Brown that this is a very fluid document and things are going to change. And I think with what we're living, what our council just stated about, FEMA opportunities, I really don't see the harm in taking action on this today, and knowing that it's scheduled, they're going to come back, and between now and then staff and others can have a chance to take a deeper dive, and then we'll just continue to update this as we go. But I think to go from really nothing to something, I think gets us going in the right direction, and who knows what could change in the next 5 weeks, and we may need a tool like this. Just my 2 cents.
Fred, you're the only one I haven't heard from. What's your 2 cents?
I agree with Jay and Beck. I'm comfortable just having it wait for the May work study.
Okay.
Yeah,
Not that I'm
So I think if it does wait till the May work study, I think everybody on the council went to the emergency management legislative trainings, which is, legislators' roles in the process. I think it's going to be really important between now and when we have this conversation that you each individually go back and look at ICS and look at the role of the council in an emergency, because there really is no role. I don't want to be.
Mark, we hear you, and we've got some homework to do on our side though too. I know you and the chief read this in detail, but other directors haven't. So I think the majority feel that we should wait till the work study. Sean, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if this is important, I have no problem in this Zoom format to have these discussions. If we wanted to have a work study next week with this, the only item on it, if we feel like we can make progress between now and then and not wait 5 weeks, I have no problem attending a session next week. Just throwing it out there.
Yeah. So all I would ask is I know that some of this stuff can seem fairly dry and dull. I'll be honest. I mean, emergency management, it can be dull. My only request is, again, we're operating without a continuity plan right now. We can throw darts at the board and hope that it's right. It may not be perfect, and honestly, that's why it's a living document, and it will always be that way. My hope is that we can at least have some type of roadmap forward. Because again, God forbid the mayor gets sick tomorrow morning and I'm out, and we lose 3 council members. And I mean, my concern is that if we don't have some type of a plan on the board, we're going to spend time when we have more of a crisis figuring out who needs to be in charge of things, instead of just saying, hey, this is good right now, we'll talk about it again in a week. Something is always better than nothing. So that would be my plea. But again, if you guys would all like to wait until next week, I'm fine with that as well.
So realistically, though, Noah and Mark, I know you've read it in detail. Noah and Nick, will you have time by Friday, because we got to prepare a packet for a meeting next week to review this plan and modify this plan? That's kind of a tall order with the limitations we have out there. So is that realistic or not?
I can definitely get it done. I was asking the chief to send it to me, and I'll do it tonight.
Yeah, I'll get it out this evening.
Yeah, I would also agree that we can do it. And I think part of this conversation, and I think Councilmember Ashby for stirring the pot on this conversation, because I guess I was unclear, and I didn't realize I was unclear until we started having this conversation about the succession of the plan, what the document means. And as the chief just laid out, if the mayor's gone tomorrow and the chief's gone, I'm not necessarily clear who's in charge looking at the document. So I think that conversation with the chief and maybe the directors would be useful for me for the holistic plan.
Okay, so it sounds like we're having a work study next week after all, and with one item on it, this.
May I also ask how council feels about the mayor being required in a timely fashion to let us know what modifications he's made to the plan?
Councilmember Rose Pippy?
I guess I'd weigh in and ask Charlie. You kind of stated it eloquently about what it meant for the changes that the mayor would make. Would that be a way of expressing it in that paragraph?
Yeah, I can play with that final sentence. It has a clause that says it's only due to changes in staffing and administrative needs, and I can see how that's read more broadly than it was intended. So I can play with that language, and then I can add the clause that says, and the mayor shall report all changes to the council as soon as practicable.
That would meet my needs.
Great.
All right. Sounds like we're not even tabling this. We're just not going to take action on it this evening. We're going to talk about it next week. And Brandy, we're going to add this hopefully back on the agenda for 28th. I think that's our next council meeting, end of the month. She's nodding her head, not real emphatically, but.
Yep, I got it on the work study for next week, and then final action, or action I should say, on the April 28th.
Okay, Perfect. All right, let's get to this last business item.
Mayor, just a quick go back.
yeah.
I'm sorry, not to complicate things, but if things went well, we could take action next week, right? We have that ability.
We could. We need to notice the meeting differently than we do. It's versus a work, as a business meeting versus a work study meeting.
I thought
Charlie,
we changed
what's
all
your-
that. Was it a different notification now? I didn't think it was.
Charlie, you want to weigh in on that?
I'm looking at your code really quickly. I believe your code codifies the meeting itself, which would make it automatically a regular meeting, even though you call it a work session.
That
Pulling
was
that
my
up
impression,
now.
that we
I
changed
think we
it to
can do
that.
anything but contracts. If I remember correctly.
Work sessions.
Why don't you look at that and we'll move on to the other items while you do your research there.
Thank you.
So we are on to item F, which is approval of a contract with Hader Industries LLC for public relations, marketing, and communications. Clerk Reinerson.
So I just prepared the staff report, but I think Noah and the mayor probably did most of the project. But so as the city grows and the population increases, there's a need for dedicated public relations and communication specialists to keep the community updated on city projects, expand on the city's current social media outreach, and to help the city to development strategies to communicate with staff. So on February 27, 2020, the finance director sent the request for statement of qualifications to 6 firms listed on the MSRC roster, which is the Municipal Research and Service Center. The city received 1 bid, which is Hader Industries LLC. So therefore, staff recommends approval of the contract with Hader Industries LLC for public relations, marketing, and communications. And the fiscal impact is the contract is not to exceed within $25,000. It's not a budgeted item. That is why it's before you for your consideration tonight.
Councilmember Diener, you raised your hand.
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve a contract with Hader Industries LLC for public relations, marketing, and communications as presented.
Second.
And second by Councilmember Diener, second by Councilmember Cacciardi, motion by Councilmember Diener. And, you know, prior to this COVID, our idea was we were going to be looking at all of our different pages for the different departments. That's really kind of on a back burner right now. I really could have used some public information officer help over the last few weeks. There's been so much information pushed out. This is really will work similar to our attorney's contract, where we're going to have a project list that we manage the projects with. Myself or Noah will assign work and for them to work on, and it's at an hourly rate of $100 per hour, and to be no more than $25,000 for this calendar year, the remainder of this calendar year. So I see Mr. Hader is, I'm not going to ask him to speak, but he is our lone member of the public attending this evening's meeting. So appreciate his attendance here tonight and your support of this potential action. So other questions of me or Noah of the process, or Councilmember Diener, since you're the motion maker?
I just wanted to say that I'm excited to see that this is getting some traction. We've talked about it. We've seen some missteps. And so I'm excited that we've got an opportunity here to really kind of make ourselves a little more prominent with the community. And I look forward to seeing this in play.
Councilmember Chang, you raised your hand?
I did have a question. I agree with Councilmember Diener. I think this is definitely a step forward. I'm a little unclear on what is meant by social media. The bullet points seem to suggest when we're talking about pages and posts that it's just Facebook, but I'm hoping we're also talking about website updates, maybe emails that go out, and possibly even Twitter. Do you consider this?
We don't have a Twitter account right now. We do have Facebook, and it is going to be a holistic look at our webpage and how we communicate. Definitely another aspect of this Noah and I've talked about, and with the consultants too, is that as we go to more electronic processes and a citywide intranet. So not only external communication, but internal communication. Been doing a lot of that this last few weeks, and I think I've included some of you guys in those communications, and I think they've been pretty good, but we can always do more and do a better job at that. So hopefully I answered your question.
Well, sort of. I think it's great what the city is doing with Facebook, but I would reiterate it with an email, because sometimes people don't see a post as quickly as they might see in their email box. It can be the same content
Fred,
going out in a different format. That's what I would suggest.
So Fred, I would say that communications is multiple channels, and I think depending on who you're talking to, social media is but one channel. And right now in today's society, I think when you look at Instagrams and Facebooks, those are kind of lumped into social media, and probably email communications is not, web is not. Your typical, you could have radio, you could have television broadcast, right? So I think from a communication standpoint, it's up to the mayor and our communications, consultant here to determine what channel is most appropriate. So I don't think it's limiting at all. It's just, for example, it's listing different mediums to which we can communicate to.
I'm looking for an expert and some guidance. That's what this is about. And I'm going to consider many forms of communication. So.
Yeah, and many channels.
And I think this is gonna get us through this year, and I hope it's really successful, and we can make an argument that we can't live without this, and that we're gonna renew this contract next year because we were so successful in its implementation. So Councilmember Rosa Pepe, you raised your hand.
Just a quick comment. I was very happy to see Ryan got the contract, being a native of Port Orchard, and the work that he's done in multiple areas that we didn't have an outside firm who doesn't know us.
Appreciate that.
Mayor, question for council under section 3 term. Should we change the commencement date, or is that unnecessary? The commencement date's April 1st of 2020. It's now
it was
the 14th.
supposed to happen a few council meetings ago, and it didn't. So
since we haven't executed the contract.
We have not. I have not signed that contract.
Right.
Yep. So we'll change that date. So I don't know that really matters.
It might not.
Okay. Councilmember Diener?
I'm looking forward to regular updates as this moves along, and I think we probably all are. I think I'm speaking for everybody.
Yep, I want to demonstrate the value of this, no doubt about it. So, okay, with that, you have a contract before you with Hayter Industries LLC for public relations and marketing communications. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, the contract is approved. We don't have any discussion items. Committee reports, I'm only aware of one that has met, and that was the Finance Committee meeting here about an hour and a half ago. So, Councilmember Clausen, do you want to defer to Mr. Crocker, or you want to take a stab at it?
No, I think I'm going to defer to Mr. Crocker. The most important part of what we talked about was just kind of the current situation that we are financially dealing with. So, Noah, if you would.
Go ahead, Noah.
Okay. So a couple things. I hope the council all received our email on the quarterly report and had a chance to review that. Again, I think I want to make the comment that the quarterly report at this point, COVID has not had an impact on the city from our financial standpoint for Q1. Q1 was real strong, real good sales growth, real good REIT growth. Department heads are managing their budgets well. So when we look at the first quarter report, everything is positive. A lot of the analysis and work we did at the Finance Committee tonight was to look at those scenarios going forward. What are the potential risks to the city as it relates to the impact of COVID? And so we looked at, in particular, the impact to our general fund and street fund, as they are the most vulnerable, as our primary funding source in the general fund is sales tax revenue. So we did some revenue loss scenarios where we looked at the impact to the fund, what the city could do from a management side, and strategize to address the loss of revenue, and where we would be at the end of the 2020 calendar year. And I think for the most part, we felt like we took some conservative revenue loss scenarios and ended fairly stable. So that gives us some comfort as we go forward the next couple months that we've analyzed a nice range of lost revenue and its impact to the city, and can strategize our management around that. So what I'd like to propose to do
So
is,
Noah, you said we were conservative. Actually, we were very drastic in the scenarios that we looked at, and they are very doom and gloom. And we in our analysis. So I'll let you. You just misstated that, and I just want to make sure that we took very, very drastic looks at this.
yes, we did. We did take a hard hit at the sales tax revenue. And when I've been talking with my colleagues in other cities about what they're doing, they're looking at reducing their revenues from 15 to 25%, and they're focused on different pieces. We took it a step further. We looked hard at the sales tax revenue for the next 9 months and ran scenarios. Well, if sales tax revenue declined by 25 to 90%, what would the impact to the city be? We want to get
that was 90%.
Yeah, we want to take a hard look at what if this really does continue longer than May 4th, and what range of impact does that have on the city? That way we can start to strategize now rather than waiting another 3 months. So what I'd like to do, Mayor, is we did record that Finance Committee through Zoom. I could push those that audio out to the full council, as well as follow up with the materials I provided and a more succinct summary, hit on the high points. That way I'm not taking everyone's time tonight unless you want to continue to ask questions.
Anybody have any questions of Noah at a high level? And he will be happy to send that package out to you tomorrow.
I think sending it out would be a great idea so everybody can kind of see the detail that they're interested in.
I agree.
Yeah, it's a probably a dozen-page PowerPoint presentation with fabulous colors. So, with that, there weren't any. We've got to get back into our committees meeting regularly. I know that the Utilities Committee meeting is scheduled for next month in May. We've got a May Finance Committee meeting. So if you could work amongst your committees, I think even if we have to meet in this format, I think we should get our committees back rolling in May, even if we can't meet in person. So it's important that we continue to conduct business. So there aren't any committee reports. I'm going to jump into the mayor's report and then director's report.
Can I do other agencies real quick?
You certainly may.
I would just let council know that John, representing Kitsap Transit, and myself participated in a Zoom meeting, a virtual meeting with Representative Derek Kilmer. And the gist of that meeting was doing a transportation upgrade to the Gorst area. It's a very expensive operation to undertaking, but it is getting traction. And Representative Kilmer indicated that potentially there's a large infrastructure package being looked at in Washington, D.C. And there may actually be opportunity to do something with Gorst. So I just thought that that was important to share with the group.
Yes, and thank you for attending that on my behalf. I was at an AWC virtual meeting that day. So thank you for sharing that. So quickly, my mayor's report here. Last Monday, I had a chance to view, and I'm sorry, I'm looking at my other screen here, not at you. Toured the local COVID testing facility, and last week it was operated by or paid for by the federal government. This week it's being paid for by the county. We have a weekly in county, meaning DEM, which we have a proportional share in. There should be some grants coming in to pay for that, but we asked lots of questions about how that's getting paid for on Monday at our conference, or yesterday's meeting. Noah talked about the cash flow analysis. Excuse me. Most of you, if you're in the workforce today, you know of the federal leave policy that gave everybody 80 hours of leave with certain conditions. Most local governments have taken a little broader approach to that and not policing some of those requirements and just gave everyone 80 hours of sick leave. And that's the approach we took, the health district took, transit took, and other cities. We could have exempted our public works and police department. I didn't feel that was appropriate to give that benefit to some employees and not to all employees. So I'm just reporting that out to you as a personal policy. Our official newspaper, the Port Orchard Independent, is no longer printing hard copies, which that doesn't meet our notice requirements, public notice requirements. It's a nominal that contract comes due in June. It's a nominal cost between now and June to also publish that in the Sun so that we can meet that requirement, and then we'll also continue to publish it in the online version of the Port Orchard Independent. We'll revisit that in June, but it's operationally a challenge to work with a weekly newspaper, and if they're going to stop printing from time to time, that doesn't meet our needs at all. I know Paulsbo actually went to one of the Seattle newspapers for their official paper. I don't think we should do that, but I think we should be advertising in a daily publication. There have been questions about LTAC funding, and I thank you to the council, and in particular Council Member Ashby pushed us a few years back to not spend money until we had it. So right now we have a $110,000 in commitments, and we have that much in the LTAC account. So there's no concerns at all in 2020 about fully funding those commitments, provided organizations have their events, and that's a completely different conversation. Parking enforcement, we have loaned our parking because there's very few people downtown. We don't need to be enforcing parking, so we've loaned our parking enforcement staff out to the Emergency Operations Center, and so we don't have any parking enforcement during this governor's order. We've also canceled the spring cleanup. We didn't feel we could conduct that activity while under the governor's order, so we hope to have a very robust fall cleanup. With the weather getting nicer and people opening their windows and being in their yards, I've gotten a couple complaints about the volume on the clock tower. And I've been I'm about three blocks away, and I probably have to agree that it was a little louder. So twice in the last 2 weeks, we've adjusted that down. I think we're down about 20% in volume over where we were. And we continue to tinker with that. But it does seem to be louder than it was before. Could be just a matter of fact that we only had 1 or 2 speakers functioning, and now we have 4 speakers functioning, and the two going facing up towards the residential area previously weren't working. Charlie had provided us some analysis on the Pee Wee and Little League leases. I think we're going to bring that forward in the 22nd is the plan. Is that correct, Brandy? What was course of action on that?
Yeah, so I think the council has a couple options. They can just leave it and goes month to month, and Charlie can confirm that. Or we can do a new contract with annual renewals up to 5 years. And if we have direction either way, we'll bring it on the April 28th agenda. I think Charlie and I discussed it, and we're going to bring forth a proposal, unless you guys tell us otherwise, an annual contract with up to 5 years renewal.
So earlier the discussion we were having about it was just a what was the term, Charlie?
A holdover? Is that what you?
Anyway, maybe we need to have some more discussion about this.
Yeah, I mean, essentially there's 3 options. One is to waive the notice requirement and just let them re-up for an additional, I believe it's additional 5 years. Alternatively, we can amend the lease so that it converts month to month or year to year. So we just needed direction from council,
So
which one they were feeling.
Neither party properly notified us of their intent to renew. And it seems to me we have problems with the parties getting along from time to time. So I kind of favored the idea of an addendum to the lease that allowed us to manage this on an annual basis. Mr. Clausen?
Yeah, when was that notice requirement? I mean, how far behind are they?
Couple months ago, and they have subsequently notified us, but not in the period that they should have.
It needed to be 90 days prior to the expiration, and the expiration is the end of this month.
I would
So
like
nothing
to.
related to the COVID
No,
would cause this delay.
no.
Okay.
Councilmember Ashby?
Yeah, what I would like to just comment on is I personally am hesitant for another 5-year lease to the group. I don't see the fields being used robustly at all. And I would like to see what our parks plan that we're in the process of doing, what that looks like before we make a long-term commitment.
So I'm hearing support for this addendum idea that gives us month-to-month or annual options to change course.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so sounds like you have some work to do, Charlie. So, okay, my other outside agencies, last week we had a public health board meeting, just to tell you that they have 101 employees over at the health district with many different tasks and jobs, and 75 of them currently are working on the outreach aspect of the confirmed cases of COVID. And as of last week, that was 5,800 staff hours at a cost of $376,000. They have been awarded a grant for about $300,000 to cover these expenses, but proportionately, we have a liability there to help pay for that and that loss. Those additional expenses, I should say. They are stating that the social distancing is working. When this first came about, when they had a confirmed case, the network of contacts was quite large. And now when they reach out to somebody, that circle is much smaller of the number of people that they have to be concerned about that may have been exposed. Last Wednesday, I had a mayor's exchange with the AWC online. As Noah in his department report, director's report, will talk about utility accounts, and many cities are we said we wouldn't turn people off, but there's nothing in our emergency order that stops the accumulation of penalties and fees, and many cities are taking a different approach to that. AWC is also pursuing relaxing restrictions on refunding, and they did a poll, and 50% of the cities out there are using this Zoom format that we're using for their council meetings. So that's all I have for my. Oh, lastly, we talked about this finance committee meeting today. We got the bids. We had 6 bids, high of 90,000, low of 61 and change on the library repairs. I'd like to bring that forward in 2 weeks and get those repairs done while the library's closed. Mark's got some internal costs that'll bring that total to, I think, around 70 grand. Is that about right? Is that about the right number, Mark? But the library is going to reopen June 1st. If we award this in 2 weeks, they start May 1st. They'll have 30 days to get that work done, and we can get the library repaired and ready to reopen when they're ready to hopefully open on 1st of June. So that's all I have. Nick, do you have anything for your department and for a report? Want me to unmute you?
Sorry, no, I got it. My only report tonight has to do with KRCC and the LUTAC meeting that was held last week. We're working on our centers policies for designating regional centers, countywide centers, and local centers. PSRC threw us a bit of a curve in terms of how they're interpreting their policy, and every city in the county, including the county, did things differently. We also found out that Pierce County, who has already adopted their countywide planning policy amendment, also did not follow what guidance is being provided now. So I know that the Plan Paul meeting for next month, I believe, has been canceled. or maybe later this month. I can't remember the date of that meeting. And that's to give us time to work with PSRC to figure out how this policy is to be interpreted. And so we're continuing to work on that. And I'll keep you posted.
Okay. And then remember, we've got a significant project in the analysis that we did with NOAA and the finance department. That downtown study is still in our plan. And Nick's going to talk about that on the 28th as a discussion item, just to get your concurrence as we work through that process, on that project. So there'll be some robust discussion about that. So, Mr. Dorsey, do you have anything you need to share?
No.
Okay, everything going good in Public Works? Okay. Noah, do you have anything you want to talk about the utility accounts?
Yeah, I just wanted to give a brief update because the mayor's asked about this. Again, we took some action to provide the mayor the authority needs to not turn off water, and we also then did not assign fees for the water shutoff, but all of the fees are applying. So far, this has not been an issue. We've had maybe 5 or less phone calls related to penalties related to people impacted by COVID. We are anticipating maybe in the next quarter billing cycle that we might see more of these. So we're trying to be responsive. I've been asked to bring forward language which would provide for some additional waiver authority. So I think since we are having a study session next week, perhaps I'll bring that draft language then for the council to kind of digest before we take an action, maybe at the following meeting.
Okay. Thank you. Noah. Anything else to share? No. Okay. Brandy?
I don't have anything.
Okay. Chief?
Nope. I think all the things that we needed to discuss tonight were discussed. Thank you.
I had a question for the chief.
Yes, sir.
I'm just curious about the nature of calls to your department these days, and if they've dropped off or if they've shifted more to home-based responses and less commercial responses, or what is that looking like these days?
Sure. So I pulled the numbers this morning. Overall, our calls for service are down about 10%, but that's mostly traffic stops. We have seen a slight increase in property crimes and domestic violence. Part of that, I think, is just that, when you put people that are used to having a break from one another and they're in their home all day long, I guess overall to say is that we're still fairly busy. We're just not proactive, which is a little unfortunate, but it is what it is. So does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
You bet.
Okay. So anything else for the good of the order? So, Mr. Clausen?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that you had talked about smart locks, and I don't know if that was something that you're going to bring up later or when.
Oh, I forgot that one, and I forgot one other thing on my mayor's report too, is that so we've got a contract signed for the security improvements at City Hall, and which are on hold because they don't meet the governor's order. So as soon as the governor's order is lifted, we'll get that contractor to work. But we've got quotes on some of our other facilities, and we were surprised how inexpensive, roughly $15,000 to do security improvements, or what they're called smart locks. So you'll have a key card and it taps the padlock versus having locks. We've got on our critical infrastructure, our water reservoirs, our lift stations, our sewer lift stations, and we've had for quite some time concerns about sabotage or vandalism to that critical infrastructure, which would be extremely expensive, or fines related to a sewer spill because something happened to somebody did something to the infrastructure. So I plan in 2 weeks to bring forward a contract for that $15,000. So let's add that to your list of things to do, Mark, for that Stanley, to bring that forward. And then Mr. Kitsap Transit reached out to me. They've got a grant opportunity that they're pursuing, and I just don't want you, I'm going to get asked if we support this idea at a future transit board meeting. One of the stimulus grants that they might be getting would be a study for a downtown transit center. So I think that dovetails very well into the downtown study that Mr. Bond's department's working on. So I think that's pretty exciting. And I just didn't want you to read about it in the newspaper. I wanted to say it here tonight. So
Is that first mile, last mile thing?
I'm not certain which grant it is. Mr. Clausen, do you know which grant that is?
No, it's not. It's just a normal grant application.
Okay.
Okay.
We're working with transit on that first mile, last mile on Bay Street.
Okay, cool. All right. With anything else for the good of the order?
Just at the next right-of-way meeting, I'd like to hear more about the first mile, last mile that Mark just talked about.
Okay. Okay, at your transportation committee, or where at?
Yeah.
Okay, okay, at the land use committee. Yeah. Okay. And I'm certain that I can count on Mr. Clausen or Mr. Pichardi to give me a ride home this evening.
I'm afraid I can't because I've got 9% left on my battery life, so I may not make it to the end of the meeting. So sorry.
All right. Have a good evening.
I don't think
And we'll talk to you soon.
Good night.
Bye.
Are we adjourned?
We're adjourned.
Thanks.